Cultured.
Yay!
Thank you all for coming to the Transforming Culture. This is going to be a big one for now with everything that's going on. So I'd like to introduce Ryan Thomas, our first speaker. Ryan is the co-founder of Cathia, which aims to support and strengthen the good works of the Catholic Church across the globe by leveraging blockchain technology to create stronger communities for innovation, activate young leaders, and to offer solutions and increase transparency. And he was also the former Director of News Operations for EWTN News. So, without further ado, Ryan
Thank you.
Thomas.
So even though I was former director of operations, my operations failed me. I thought this talk was going to be tomorrow. So I had to finish this up this morning, and I'm going to have to look at my notes a little bit more than I expected. A little bit about my background. So I spent 9 years with EWTN News, Catholic News Agency, and their sister agencies. 6 of those years were in Latin America, in Peru, and in Chile. And I was in Chile right after sexual abuse broke down there. We saw recently all of the Chilean bishops resigned. Pope Francis, I think up until now, has accepted 5 of those resignations. I was baptized at 15 into the church, confirmed a couple years later. The sexual abuse in the church, the first big one in 2002, broke, and that priest that baptized me was accused of sexual assault, sexual abuse. The bishop was found guilty, I think, of manslaughter. So I had my faith really shaken right away. And then I was part of a religious community for 9 years. I was a consecrated layman, and my community was rocked by sexual abuse. So the founder turned out, he presented himself as this very holy man, and it turned out he wasn't. So I've had a decent amount of experience with sexual abuse and scandal within the church. I oversaw the news operations for news agencies in 5 languages around the world, spent a lot of time in Rome. So I have unfortunately I've had a lot of contact with scandal and what we're living right now in the church. So I wanted to give you that background and talk to you about, you saw a little bit the topic. I want to tell you a story first before we get into some criteria of how to respond to this. A hit has just been placed on a bishop. Millions of people have lost their faith in the last decade. The new government is one of the most abusive in history. There's no trust in government or religion. Apocalyptic signs are everywhere and hope has been lost. Those who have become Catholic in recent years are mocked because of the lack of coherence, the abuses, and just a general feeling of being defeated. Some of the key players in this story, a very simple man. It's been about 5 years since his conversion. He's a guy from the country, and despite the crisis, he goes every week from the country into the city for catechesis. He doesn't have plans to transform the world. He doesn't have a great project. He's not running any programming. He's very humbly going, receiving catechetical education, and trying to live his faith. The bishop, who's quite old now, was just named a bishop a couple years before. He was close to retirement and was hoping to spend the rest of his life in prayer, studying, researching, writing. When he arrived in his diocese, it was an utter chaos, and evangelization efforts had been marginal at best. The priests and religious just couldn't connect with the people. They couldn't speak their language. Even the community, he was a Franciscan, even his fellow Franciscans criticized him because Franciscans aren't supposed to be bishops. It goes against their charism. He felt alone, rejected, and maybe even abandoned by God. Then the news received that he had a hit on him by the government. He was navigating very complicated issues, and the president, a real bully, a gangster maybe, had sent him a very clear message. Mind your own business, celebrate the Mass, and don't speak about our abuses. Now the people of this group were broken from years of economic upheaval, political turmoil, religious scandal, and a feeling of despair. Media and influencers were stoking this fear and trying to cause a rebellion. The global church in other parts of the world was deaf to what was happening. They had their other priorities in Europe. The Germans had begun to propose drastic changes to church teaching. Bishops and cardinals seemed to be more concerned with consolidating political power. And yet the common people were being scandalized by the lavish and incoherent lifestyles that the clergy were living. Meanwhile, millions had been systematically leaving the church. Even the Pope in this story was refusing calls to respond to what was going on. He was so prideful, he wasn't even naming bishops to certain regions of the world. Now, I'm not describing today, even though there are a lot of similarities. I'm talking about 1531. I was just talking to J.M. Boyd before coming in today, and I just came from Mexico, and I'm working on a book. I just spent the last 3 days on Our Lady of Guadalupe. The story I just described is the context in which God interrupts time and space to totally transform the new world. At this time, it's 1531, Muñoz de Guzman, the president of what they called the first audience, the government of New Spain, was literally a gangster. He was the bodyguard for the Emperor Charles V. I mean, the guy was just a monster. Monsignor Chavez, who I was with in Mexico a couple days ago, said, no, gangsters are saints compared to Muñoz de Guzman. I mean, the guy was he was terrible. He enslaved the indigenous, he threatened, he beat people up, just a disaster. Now the Bishop Zumarraga, was 60 years old when Charles V asked him to leave Spain, travel 3 months across the Atlantic, and take up as the first bishop of the New World. Now, 60 years old in 1531 is really old, okay? He was a Basque, meaning he was from the northern part of Spain. His Spanish wasn't even that good, okay? He only had 30, and this is when he first arrived, there were only 12 missionaries. Tens of millions of people, 12 missionaries, okay? Now, the Aztecs, they were a broken and conquered people who had their temples destroyed, torn down. Their gods had turned out to be phonies. They had felt abandoned. In their belief and in their culture, they had to sacrifice. They did human sacrifices, about 20,000 a year. Okay, so imagine, you're a Spaniard, you arrive to this new world. The Spanish had just reconquered and reunified Spain. They had moved the Muslims out. If you weren't Catholic, you were forced to leave, okay? So they had this view of re-Christianizing. They arrive there, and what do they see? They see tens of thousands of people literally being, you guys have seen Indiana Jones, when the guy pulls out the beating heart. It's worse than that there. It's absolutely worse, because they believe that their gods had to be fed with human blood. When Hernan Cortez arrives, the emperor, Montezuma, arrives, greets them. He thinks he's a god, okay? And serves them dry blood on the food. I mean, the Spanish were just so scandalized by this that they just tore down the temples when they conquered them. But as a consequence, you have a people that is just totally broken, okay? Now in Rome had just recently been sacked, because remember, you've got the Protestant Reformation going on. Charles V, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire had contracted German mercenaries who, outside of Rome, decided when they were on their downtime to sack Rome. Okay? So imagine, you're the emperor of the Holy Roman Emperor. Your mercenaries sack Rome, burn Rome. The Pope is now saying, I don't want anything to do with Charles V. As a response, he's not naming bishops anywhere. So Zamarga arrives. He's not even consecrated bishop. He was named bishop by the emperor, and he had to wait 4 years before being consecrated a bishop. So he arrives there with this major task. He's named protector of the Indians. He's got this president who was a real gangster. And this is the context in which he arrives, right? Now, at the same time in Europe, you have the scientific revolution happening, a total destruction of the Catholic cosmovision, in which at the time, we saw everything from a theological standpoint. The explanation of the seasons, the growth. We just heard this talk about ecology. Like everything was explained through the love of God. And now this is just being totally rocked, okay? Major, incredible crisis. And the center of this story is our friend Juan Diego, a very common, simple man from the country. No children. His wife had passed away a few years before. And I want to share the story of Nakan Mapoa, which it's not a story, it's a history of how God interrupts time and space to really radically change the new world. Because I think there are some crucial keys that we need to remember and we need to live in this time of crisis. So for those of you that know the story, I'm going to give you the abridged version. I'm not going to quote perfectly, but I do want to make some commentaries and I want to accent a few things. So we're on December 9th, 1531, and Juan Diego is on his way into Mexico City. He lived out in the country, and the indigenous would run places, okay? So he would run and jog, and I was just in Mexico City. It's at 7,300 feet above sea level, so you got to be in pretty good shape there. And he's crossing over what's called Tepeyac Hill, okay? And there he hears the sounds of paradise, the chirping of beautiful birds, and he kind of looks around, and all of a sudden, the Virgin Mary appears to him. And he's overwhelmed by this experience, and they have this very beautiful dialogue in which she calls him, "Dear Juancito," my dearest little Juan, now my dear son. And she asks for something very simple. Go to the bishop and ask that a temple be built here for her son, so that she can show all of her love for him. Now, how many times have we been in prayer and thought of doing something great for our Lord, for the church, right? We get overwhelmed with this idea, okay, great, we've got good positive emotions going, right? And it starts off sweet, right? So overwhelmed with the honor of coming face to face with the Mother of God and being offered such an important request, a humble man, he goes to the bishop. This is the part where it probably gets tricky for us all, right? The bishop, the diocese, the bureaucracy, this is where good ideas and good people go to die, right? So he gets there, and Zumarraga, while being a Franciscan, did not wear the brown habit, okay? If you see paintings of him, he wore a blue habit. He wore blue out of his love for Mary and his belief in that time in the Immaculate Conception, which the Dominicans and Franciscan theologians were discussing and arguing about. December 9th, the previous day, he had just celebrated a Mass for the Immaculate Conception, and the people are on the verge of a revolt. He had just completed a novena to Our Lady asking for her intervention, okay? So remember that he has this hit placed on him basically by the president, okay? Any indigenous that goes to him complaining about the Spanish could be killed, and potentially the bishop. The bishop had tried to sneak messages to Charles V. There's a whole drama there. Okay, so Zumarga receives him. He listens intently to the story, and being a prudent man he told Juan Diego to come back. He wanted to think and pray about what he said. Now, how often do we say, this is typical of us American Catholics, right? Let me pray about it, right? This is often our polite way of saying no. So you have this good meeting, everything, and all of a sudden you hear, let me pray about it, you know? So he goes back to Mary, and he feels rejected, right? Why didn't the bishop believe him? So what does he do? He does what we often do. He tries to negotiate with God, right? Now you got the wrong guy, like get somebody who's a noble, an aristocrat, right? Somebody that has a reputation. The bishop doesn't know me. Mary responds to him, nope. I have many servants, she says, many servants, but I choose you. You're the one I want, okay? So this is something I think we also have to remember. You can't negotiate with God. When he chooses something for you, when he asks something of you, it's not because you're worthy, right? How many times do we hear this, right? He doesn't choose the worthy, he makes us worthy, right? So this is the case of Juan Diego. So he's going through the roller coaster of every single experience of God asking something of us, right? So he goes back. Our man JD meets the virgin back again, and he says, "Okay, I will take." This is beautiful. He says, "I will take your venerable breath with me." How beautiful is that? Venerable breath, right? So that's the attitude that Juan Diego has. He goes back to the bishop, tells him all over again the story. Bishop Zumarga, when he was in Spain, was a member of the Inquisition. Okay, he was a judge. He was really good at asking questions, right? So he tells Juan Diego, okay, I've prayed about things, but I need a sign to confirm things. Okay. Juan Diego is renewed because he's reminded by Mary, nope, you're my man. Okay. So he says, no problem. I will go back to Mary. I will get the sign. You just think of the sign. I'll come back. We'll be good. So he leaves, and the bishop, as bishops do, wanted to know about the reputation of the person they're working with. So he sends two of his servants to follow him. Now, these servants were also indigenous servants, and they were not the best of guys. They follow him. They lose him along the way. You know, it's kind of like the experience of, how Jesus would kind of disappear in the crowds and things of that nature. It wasn't his time, so to speak. So the servants, being kind of bad actors, go back to the bishop and say, he's a liar, he's a dreamer, he's making this stuff up. Juan Diego goes back, finds his uncle. Remember, his wife had passed away. He goes back to his uncle who was sick and at the point of death. And he spends the entire day, goes and gets a doctor, and the doctor says, no, there's nothing we can do. It's December, it's the middle of winter, you're at 7,300 feet in Mexico, right? Very cold, things got bad. So the next morning he gets up. He was supposed to meet the Virgin Mary to get this sign that previous day. And he gets up and he goes into the city to look for a priest. So that they didn't give last rites at this point to the indigenous, but so that he could have his uncle's confession heard by a priest. And as he's going into the city, he remembers there's the hill. Uh-oh, I had an appointment here yesterday, right? So he takes this little path alongside. At the time, Mexico was surrounded by these large lakes. He takes the path along the shore to avoid her. Again, like how many times, even after confirmation that, yes, this is what we want, we avoid God, right? Maybe we skip out on, we're doing a novena and we forget a day, or, we can think of a million different examples, right? We try to avoid that meeting with God. And she comes down, floating down the hill. And it's beautiful because she doesn't correct him. She's not aggressive with him. She's not saying, what's wrong with you, Juan Diego? No, like in a very motherly way, she speaks to him. And she says, where are you going? Right? And he says, oh, you'll understand. My uncle is sick, all of this. Don't you know who I am? She says, I know everything. And her words here are some of my favorite, right? She says, that's fine, my little son, right? Let me find exactly. She says, I see all. Am I not here? I, who have the honor to be your mother. Are you not in my shadow and under my protection? We have Ralph here. And this morning, I pick him up, and I haven't seen him in like a week or so, and give him a big hug, and I start kind of walking away, and he goes, no, I want my mommy. I mean, he's in, sorry, I didn't mean to tease you, Ralph. But that's how little children are, right? They're in the shadow of their mother. Think of the words that she uses here. She says, also, am I not the source of your joy? What else do you need? What else do you need? So reassured by her words of love, peace, it says, peace overcomes his heart. And he asks to be sent with her venerable word, okay? So that's when she instructs him to go over the hill, cut some roses, and she says, bring them back to me and I'll arrange them. Again, this is the feminine genius in here, the mother. Us guys will go over there, we'll chop up those roses and it'll be kind of a mess. She comes back, she arranges them. Beautiful way, right? He goes to the bishop, and the servants don't let him in. They try to see what's in the tilma, and they're blinded momentarily, and he's able to pass by. Bring it to the bishop. He unfolds the flowers, and there's the tilma. Okay? The flowers were Castilian roses. They weren't brought to the New World yet. It's the middle of winter, right? There's all of these things coming together. An important point, this is on December 12th, but that's in the old Julian calendar. The Gregorian calendar, you move things up 10 days. December 22nd, the winter solstice, the darkest, shortest day of the year. This is when Mary appears, okay? Think in your head, I was going to use this, but apparently it doesn't, it's not very bright. But think of the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. She's standing on an eclipse, okay? It's a black moon. She's standing on an eclipse, which for the indigenous, the Aztecs, it was an apocalyptic sign. It was evil. There was a battle between the sun and the moon constantly, and the eclipse, and they had these calendars, right, to know when the eclipse were. And before the eclipse, they would sacrifice so many people so that the sun would win, okay? So here's this woman with the sun behind her, standing on the eclipse, this incredible image that speaks in so many ways. Well, what happens? We have God interrupting in the darkest moment for the Aztecs, an incredibly dark moment for the church. 8 million people had left the church during the Protestant revolt. 9 million came into the church in the next 10 years in the New World, with 40 missionaries. Zumarga dies age 80, okay? It's 1531, for the 16th century. He dies at age 80 of exhaustion after so many confirmations. He confirmed 400,000 people in his lifetime. 400,000, okay? There's no precedent in the history of the world for something like this. So why do I tell this story? We're living in a dark time. It's going to get darker. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to get darker. We're going to see, more things come out about bishops and priests and laity, and we're going to feel alone. We're going to feel less prideful of our faith, and we have to be reformers, right? Remember again, though, the context in which God interrupts this crucial moment in history. He does it with a humble, faithful, simple man. Yes, he does it. He doesn't, and what the Virgin gives is not, she doesn't anoint somebody to be the new president of New Spain. No, she doesn't do that. She doesn't give a document that says, here are the human rights that everybody has to respect. She doesn't come up with a super program of catechesis for the missionaries to apply. She shows her love. She asks for a simple temple. And at the time, this temple, if you've ever been to the basilica there, again, Mexico was very different. She asked for a temple on the edge of a saltwater lake. History says that probably a dozen times the temple was flooded. Okay? She could have asked for it on the top of the hill. She asked for it on the edge of a dirty, salty lake because, in a sense, she's inviting herself into our heart, which is dirty, which is salty, which sometimes gets flooded with bad things. That's where she wants to be. Okay? And she's bringing her son. So I put this in the context, Juan Diego, and I brought from Mexico a bunch of little medals of Juan Diego if anybody wants one afterwards. Juan Diego is the patron, St. Juan Diego, 2002, he was canonized, patron of the laity. Patron of the laity. That's everyone in this room, I think, right? So here's a man that we need to start praying to. We need to start asking for his intervention. The symbol, too, of God coming down, incarnation through the Virgin Mary. But she appears to a layman. She doesn't appear to a bishop. She doesn't appear to a Spaniard. She appears to an indigenous who there was a lot of talk at the time if they were even, full human beings. A layman who goes to the bishop and says, this is what God wants. This is a perfect symbolism of our church. Okay, this is Vatican II, 450 years before it happened. And Mary doesn't do anything without the support of the bishop. Right now, we want to smack our bishops around, we want to name the bad ones, and I'm guilty of that myself. We can't do anything without our bishops. We're Catholics. We're Catholics, okay? So, Juan Diego is a bridge. He's a man with real insecurities, with real ups and downs. He tries to negotiate his way out of things, all with good intentions, right? He's faithful. He's not a man with grand designs. I sometimes consider myself a man with grand designs. He doesn't have incredible gifts. I don't think I have incredible gifts. But he's faithful and humble. We have to remember that. He's a bridge between his people and the Spanish, the bridge between God's designs, not our own, and the bishop. And he pleads for the bishop to respond to God's designs and God's message. He's a bridge between the creative love of God and the empty heart of his people. He was a contemplative missionary. He spent the rest of his life living in this little hermitage right next to the temple. And that's where we believe he's buried. And his role there was to sweep the floor. He swept the floor, which was an honor, okay? What we need today, in my opinion, are Marian-centric bishops. Mary, and especially Our Lady of Guadalupe, holds crucial keys for us to live our faith. There's the Benedict option, and there's the Marian option, and I'm a proponent of the Guadalupe option, which is perfect enculturation. That's what we need, right? So I think we need to help our bishops to return back to being Marian bishops, praying the rosary, thinking about, during the Protestant revolt, there's a lot of criticism towards how Catholics honor Mary. The way that she presents herself is totally Christ-centric. It's all about her son. But she doesn't remove herself. She was chosen, right, to bring Christ into the world. She is the star of the first evangelization and the new evangelization. She brings Christ to the new world. So, Zumarraga, except one thing in his life, which is pretty bad, He was the first promoter of allowing the indigenous to become priests, and the first couple ones went back to their pagan ways and bad stuff, and he made an example of one of them using old Inquisition techniques. But besides that, because I asked, why isn't this guy a saint? And then I discovered that, and well, hopefully he's in heaven, but he's probably not going to be declared a saint. But he gives an example of a priest, of a bishop who was courageous, who was valiant, who went up against this bully gangster president. He wore blue. He loved Mary. He put her first. He was prudent. Again, he confirmed 400,000 people in his lifetime. And I want to remind all of us, too, of the saying from St. Louis de Montfort. And he says, when the Holy Spirit finds Mary in your heart, he flies to it. Because where Mary is, there's Jesus, right? So we really need to renew our bishops by renewing their love to Mary. Enculturation. In a new world with unspeakable abuses and complexity, she shows the missionaries, that's us in this room here, through her image, a perfect enculturation for the Spanish and the Aztecs, even for Muslims, even for Jews. Her name, Guadalupe, is an Arabic name, okay? So you've got Saint Mary of Guadalupe. That's what she says her name is. Mary comes from Hebrew and Arabic. There are so many mysteries to still unlock about Guadalupe for the conversion of Jews, for the conversion of Muslims. I'm totally convinced. I was telling Matt about this the other day. I'm working with some Protestants. I shared with them what's going on, the miracle of Guadalupe, and they said, Ryan, besides the resurrection, this is the greatest miracle in the history of the world. And we're going there next month. I'm going there with these 3 big Protestant guys to do a project. The other thing I want to accent, and you're going to be speaking about, reforming maybe our view of the Catholic woman, is this idea of motherhood, okay? There are some ideas out there right now with the abuse of saying, okay, now we need to ordain women and we need to do this and that. I think that's wrong. We have to recover, and we have Catherine here, the head of Endow. We have to really recover this idea of the feminine genius. We have to recover this idea properly of motherhood in the way that we really live these virtues. That's how we're going to reform our church. Again, Mary doesn't respond with a new constitution for the government, not by anointing someone to be the new president or giving human rights. She comes with a simple request of a temple with her own image. I want to just end by sharing the last a quote. Everything else I've kind of summarized here. But I really think that this is crucial for us in this time of abuses when we personally feel abandoned and sad and angry and all of these things. We need to go to Mary, who's going to take us more perfectly to Jesus. And let's really think about these words here that she says to Juan Diego. Listen, put into your heart, my youngest son, that what frightened you, what afflicted you is nothing. Do not let it disturb your face, your heart. Do not fear this sickness or any other sickness, nor any sharp or hurtful thing. Am I not here, I who have the honor to be your mother? Are you not in my shadow and under my protection? Am I not the source of your joy? Are you not in the hollow of my mantle, in the crossing of my arms? Do you need anything more? Be my messenger. You belong to me. Again, guys, the scandals will continue. The news will get worse. Jesus has already risen. He's already won. Okay? Nobody in this room is going to be the conqueror of, the reform. Together, we can do things, right? But think about this example of Juan Diego, this very simple man from the country who said yes, who got scared, who said yes again, who freaked out, right? this is a very real example of what we're living today. And so I just want to end by all of us praying together. When Christopher Columbus came over for the first time, he wasn't a great navigator. He wasn't a great sailor. He wasn't a great captain. He had lots of problems. He actually made a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Guadalupe, which there's a shrine in Spain, which predates the appearance of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico. And there's an image there, a sculpture that they say was made by St. Luke, the evangelist. And so he made a pilgrimage there after he returned from his first voyage, because in the middle of his trip, they encountered a big storm, maybe a hurricane, who knows. And they prayed to Mary that they would survive. And they made commitments, all of them, on the ship to do a pilgrimage to a Marian site in Spain if they survived. And so every single night after that, they prayed the Salve. They looked up at the stars and they prayed the Salve. So let's pray that together, huh? Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, our life, our sweetness, and our hope. To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in the valley of tears. Turn then, most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy towards us, and after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary, pray for us, O Holy Mother of God,
that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ.
Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Again, I'll pass this around for any of you that want a medal of Juan Diego. If you take one, you have to promise you will increase your devotion to him and Our Lady. If not, it's on your own conscience. I'm going to take this off outside. I'm not leaving, I'm just taking off this microphone outside. Yes?
Does anybody have any questions or things they wanted to talk to Ryan about with Jesus?
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hang in there. Oh my gosh.
The last slide was already, and then I cut your wife's ice, and we were like there, so you did cut slides, right? Just double check. Yeah.
What do you mean?
We're running darling, so I can start, if everyone's back in here, I can probably go ahead and start just really if she needs to talk, or I can just wait till.
I think my class is 30 minutes longer. Yeah, no, underneath. So, yeah, so I mean, it's not a big deal to me. If everybody's back in here, though,
Do it.
Oh, no, okay, all right, you're gonna find them. I do that all the time, and then they're like right there, yeah, I know. Okay. I'm done. Malikia. Nice to meet you. Oh, Marie. Sorry. That's beautiful. Yeah, so are you, you did grow up here? Okay, great. Nice to meet you. I'm Donna. Yeah. Same name as you, really, right? For the Madonna. Yeah. Yeah. So you live where did you say? Ontario? Oh, Montreal. Is Ontario on the other side? Or is it in the middle? Okay. Okay. I love the Anne of Green Gables series, which was like, Prince Edward Island. Oh my gosh, yeah, just from the movies, like, we just watch it. Oh my gosh, I've never gone, but I do want to see it someday. Yeah, it's a small island. There's a lot of islands, right? Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. So how did you connect with this group? Wow, Facebook, yeah. Wow, yeah. Yeah. What are your art, like, what is the art, graphic design? Well, so, the company I work for is sponsoring one of the events, but we hired, Marcelino and Connor and Catherine to do redesign our website. So, yeah, they finished their design work now, our web guy is building it out. But I like to draw. I did take a lot of art in school, and I, got my major was English, but my emphasis was creative writing. Yeah, so, but I never did anything like what she did with her poetry reading. Like that was just like that was intense, man. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, I never did anything like that. So I just admire it a lot. The curriculum to do something like that.
The typical one, or
And then she said she changed it like
it's easier to transport.
yeah, crazy, like because then when you want to reverse it, yeah, like. I guess is that she burns herself into it when she does it, so it's not like a leap to have to find the connection there. So that was really tough.
Yeah, it's like St. Joseph.
So what kind of graphic arts do you do? Like illustration?
Mostly layout design.
Oh, technology? Cool.
You make your own fonts? No, but like, mainly, I really think layout.
Okay, alright, nice.
Just go to the Basilica to see the image.
You too? Are you like a graphic artist too, or no? You're just a project manager, you're like, I'm gonna be in. I take care of all of it. Yeah,
And that's very important. It is.
More people
Yeah.
go to Guadalupe than Vatican.
I mean, I do photography. That's not
Tuesday,
crazy.
just Tuesday this week.
Yeah.
And I actually find that cooking is my most creative.
6 hours away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
They spend the entire
What's your
week
favorite
there,
cuisine?
mass after mass after mass after mass.
Really? Wow, those are totally different. Like it's like Eastern spices.
Yes, there's a lot of curries,
Land
and
O'Lakes.
sauces, like thing I just do it with my hands, like non-red.
Oh my god.
But I just, there's really strong flavors.
Walking from the airplane, like you're looking down and you're like,
You can see a lot of people because of
Yeah,
the ingredient shopping from the airport.
and you just love
But you don't think I'm that.
Are you shopping just for yourself or are you shopping?
I love taking all 5 children.
Are you serious?
Yes. And people, like seriously, they're like, what?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
It's so I love grocery shopping by it's like just in general, but I also like to see kids and walking up and down the
So
aisles
this
and
is
talking about
40 days
films
of
and
walking.
looking at
Also,
different
800 miles, something like that.
That's good.
It's hot. She gets to the Basilica.
Yeah, I'm not into the shopping thing.
I'm so over it.
Yeah.
There it is.
I like all things, you know. I thought of you.
With one you.
Yeah.
It's so good to
I'm
see
just
you.
grabbing coffee.
Okay. Okay, cool.
All right, we're going to continue on our transforming culture track now.
I feel weird seeing the front row. It's a Catholic thing, right?
Now we're going to hear from Corinne Starsinek. Did I say that right?
Starsinek.
Starsinek.
Yes.
Okay. And Corinne is the founder of the Catholic Woman, which has set out to illustrate the many faces and vocations of Catholic women so that millennial Catholic women of all backgrounds, races, and vocations can know that all women are welcome, accepted, and valued in the Catholic Church. And she is going to speak with us today on rethinking the way that we talk about Catholic women. So let's all welcome her.
Hi, guys. As Catherine said, I run the Catholic Woman. And a lot of what you're going to hear about today is kind of where the Catholic Woman started for me. Let me just open my notes here real quick. So today, I want to share with you why I think we should rethink the way we talk about the Catholic woman. So just to give you an overview of where I'm going to go with this, I want to first have each of us reflect on our own understanding of who the Catholic woman is, what that vision looks like for us in each of our minds. And then from there, I just kind of want to share with you my story, who I grew up to believe the Catholic or the Christian woman was, and my evangelical background, and then how becoming Catholic just completely transformed that. And then I want to share with you why I believe the Catholic Church's personalistic teaching on the human person can be the remedy to sexism and really just the foundation for our vision of who the Catholic woman is. And I am speaking from my personal experience as a woman, and I know there are men in this room, just a few of you. And I think a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be able to apply to you too, but I can't really speak exactly to the masculine genius or to the man's experience. So anyway, first, I just want each of you to go ahead and close your eyes, and I want you to think about this. What comes to mind, or who comes to mind when you think of the Catholic woman? Just reflect on that for a few seconds. Perhaps it's Mary, as we just heard a little bit of her story. Maybe it's a saint or someone you know or related to. Maybe it's not even a real woman, more of a caricature of a woman. I just want you to reflect on that, who this image of the Catholic woman is in your mind. Great. Okay, you can open your eyes. So no matter who came to mind for you, good image, bad image, right, wrong, I want you to just kind of take that with you and carry it with you throughout my talk. And then when you walk away from here, I want you to kind of step back and think about this image that you have of the Catholic woman and re-examine it in light of what we talk about today, or what I hope to share with you today. So first, I want to share with you my personal story, who I grew up to believe the Christian woman was. So for me, womanhood could basically be boiled down to this: materialism and vanity, dressed up with lipstick on and accepted socially as womanhood. This is my vision for the Catholic woman in my evangelical community. I was all about attraction, all about looking good on the outside, and just assuming that things would fall together on the inside. Because, well, things look perfect together on the outside, so why wouldn't they be good on the inside? Let me see. In addition to this understanding of womanhood based on attraction and physical appearance, it also kind of meant hiding the parts of you that were truly feminine, the parts of you that, at least within my community, were kind of shamed and we were told to keep quiet about. So when I started puberty at 12 or 13, before any of my friends, it was the worst. And I imagine some of you can probably relate to this experience. When I started puberty before any of my friends, My friends made fun of me, and I felt incredibly alienated and isolated from them. I remember hating my body and hating that I was a girl because of the way that what was happening to my body was alienating me from my friend group, from my brothers, and I even felt like it was alienating me from God. I felt as though what was happening to me was outside of the realm of God's interest, just like something disgusting and gross, and like God just did not care about this. But again, on the flip side, my understanding of womanhood was all about attraction. I felt that my purpose in life as a girl, and I couldn't articulate this at the time, but in retrospect, I can see it. I thought my purpose was to be beautiful and to be pretty. So there were 3 ways that really primarily manifested itself in my life. 3 embarrassing ways, and hopefully I'm not like entirely alone in some of this. So first, in my Christian community. So in my youth group, I had a couple of my friends hand me this book called Are You Dateable? And I don't remember a bunch about this book, but I do remember that there were just a couple pages where the adult male author takes some time to describe the ideal teenage Christian girl. So, yeah, just something to think about. But he describes her as, first, free-spirited, carefree, can get messy and have fun with the guys and just not care, I guess. Number 2, she was beautiful but had no knowledge of it. And number 3, she was mysterious. She was that perfect mix of introvert and extrovert. She knew when to shut up in front of a guy and let him talk because, girls talk so much. So we have to stop and be self-aware and let guys talk. It wasn't a great image of the Christian woman, of the Catholic woman, yet for me, that became the foundation for how I saw womanhood. Not good. And unfortunately, there's public record of this too. So I took this to Facebook, took these ambitions to Facebook, and really made it my storefront for selling myself as this object of attraction. This is my daughter, Eloise. I think she wants to chime in here a little bit. Anyway, so Facebook really, became the storefront for these ambitions of mine. So I don't know if any of you here use this. I used to use this app called Picnic back before I learned how to use Photoshop or Lightroom. And I would take, Picnic was like a cheaper, free version of Photoshop and Lightroom. And I would take these pictures of myself and edit them in a way that I thought made me look super attractive. And I'd post them online and hope to, bring in all the Christian youth group boys that I went to church with. And I will say, so I met Nick, my husband over here, in high school. So it kind of worked in a way, right? But I don't recommend this. We were Facebook friends, and never mind, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, in addition to that, I posted quotes that I thought maybe look real cool. I posted lyrics from hipster indie bands. I just wanted to look like the ideal Christian attractive girl. But I think this obsession of mine really is most obvious within my prayer life. So I keep prayer journals, and I've kept them since I was 10. And if you go back through them, page upon page, journal after journal, I am praying about my future husband, which is not a bad thing. I recommend doing that. But I took it to an unhealthy amount. This was like the center of my prayer life. All I could think about was my future husband. And on top of that, in my journals, I had list upon list of the ideal, non-compromisable traits in my future ideal husband. And it's funny, because Nick was Catholic, and Catholic was not on that list. So again, really I have to say too, with my journals, I don't think I got this idea from myself necessarily. Within my youth group, we had these small groups where a lot of the times our conversations were about boys and about dating. So, we were encouraged to create these lists of our ideal traits in our husbands, which isn't bad. Again, it's good to have standards. We have to have standards as men and women for who we date. But I was 14, and some of the things that were on that list were like blonde hair, tan skin, very athletic. Anyway, I just feel like maybe if if they hadn't had us thinking about boys so much, perhaps this would have turned out like a little bit differently. They even did, you guys are probably familiar with this because I've seen some Catholics do this too. They had us, in one of my small groups, they had us pass around a fake flower and each of us were to take a petal off of it. And at the end, they were like, this is what happens to a girl when she has too many boyfriends. And I know they were saying that. They were saying that to like tell us like you're gonna lose a sense of yourself if you have too many boyfriends, which never mind, we can talk about that later. But also, one, you're comparing a girl to a flower, which is something to be said of. Second, you're kind of implicitly telling girls like you're not going to be pretty anymore if you have too many boyfriends. And third, the idea that you're going to lose your dignity if you've had too many boyfriends. So again, I really feel like if they hadn't emphasized this so much growing up, maybe I wouldn't feel this way today. But it all kind of worked out for good. So again, just to reiterate, my understanding of womanhood was attraction. It was to be a trophy. I was a trophy to be won. That's how I viewed myself, unfortunately. One moment. Yeah, the ideal Christian woman to me was the beautiful woman with a boyfriend or a fiance and tons of friends and just a gorgeous life. But enter Catholicism. So through a long series of events that I'm not going to be able to go into now, I became interested in the Catholic Church, which was a huge surprise to me. But the more I learned truly about the teachings of the Church and about the history of the Church and the unity of the Church, the more I felt convicted to become Catholic. However, I still kind of had this little concern in the back of my mind. It was a more superficial one, but still important, especially in regards to this journey of mine. So I kept wondering, who is the Catholic woman and do I measure up? I would actually go on Facebook and look up Catholic women's Facebook profiles and like try to get an understanding of like what that looked like. So this vision that I had for Catholic womanhood was very poor. My very well-meaning family and my well-meaning friends and my non-denominational community told me that if I were to become Catholic, my personality and my unique gifts would be oppressed. They told me, this is my vision for the Catholic woman, and this isn't shared amongst all evangelicals, but this is mine. The Catholic woman had long, unbrushed hair, which, never mind. She was stern. She had tons of babies. And she didn't really care about God. She just cared about rules and being told what to do. She was legalistic. And of course, if she wasn't a mom, then she was a nun stuck in a convent somewhere. So not too great. But anyway, that didn't deter me from becoming Catholic. Because the more I learned about the church, the more I'm like, I don't think this is true. But eventually, though, I did come into the church. So when I became Catholic, I did quickly realize the culture around women amongst Catholics, at least in the circles that I was in, wasn't a ton different than what I grew up with. A lot of the women's spiritual resources that were marketed to me and to other women, Catholic women, were exclusively on modesty of clothes, on dating, on waiting for your future husband, on being told you're beautiful. And I have to say, I don't think those things are bad, especially if they're done holistically, more going beyond just the interior and going interior. But a lot of the times, I'm not sure that happened. It was very much, I felt like a lot of those talks were reacting to, those talks and books and resources were reacting to what was going on in secular culture. And sometimes, as a result of that, not actually getting into like the real truth and principles in the Catholic Church. And I have to make the distinction here too, that this is more of a critique in my observation of fallible, temporal, sometimes culturally based Catholic culture, not necessarily not the teachings of the church. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like, personally, the Catholic woman is treated as someone who just desperately needs to be told they're pretty, someone who needs to know how to dress, and someone who desperately wants to find a husband. And those things aren't necessarily bad, but if that's all we're defining women's spiritual resources as, I think we have some work to do. And I do want to add this too, that this was just back earlier in my days of Catholicism, right after I converted. But since then, people like Endow, Blessed is She, and the Given Institute are some awesome resources that are doing this for women, that are creating resources that really speak to the humanity, the entire personhood of a woman, not just like these specific parts. But again, at that time, I didn't see those resources available for me. So this question still remained in me, though, of who is the Catholic woman, and do I measure up to her? Do I look like her? Am I acting like her? Am I shopping at the right places? All of these very superficial and kind of American questions. All that being said, even though my experience of how Catholic women were treated, in my particular experience within Catholic circles, wasn't awesome, it wasn't really until I encountered the teachings of the church that my understanding of womanhood was just completely transformed. So I studied philosophy and theology at school, and in my philosophy and theology classes, I encountered Pope St. John Paul II's personalism. And I'm sure some of you in here are familiar with personalism, and then some of you, maybe it sounds familiar, but you haven't really explored it before. But I think, just as I'll explain it here in a moment, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, I think it's going to sound really familiar to you. I really believe that the way Jesus looks at us is personalistic. So, that being said, personalism is this idea that the human person was created fundamentally good. In its negative aspect, the personalistic norm, which is a part of personalism, states that the person is a kind of good which does not admit of use and cannot be treated as an object of use and as such a means to an end. So that means we can't use each other as persons. We can't reduce each other. And it means for me, I can't reduce myself to a measure of attractiveness. In its positive form, the personalistic norm confirms this. The person is a good toward which the only proper and adequate attitude is love. And love here, I think we can, at least in part, define as willing the best of the other. So for all of us, that means the only proper attitude we ought to have towards each other is love. We only ought to have the best interests in mind of each of us. So I remember spending hours in the library and hours on my dorm room floor just reading books like this one over here, and other documents, and just having like these strong, random emotional reactions to this kind of abstract notion of the human person. And I think at that time, in retrospect, God was unraveling this kind of toxic, sexist understanding I had of womanhood and answering my prayers, where I've asked God my entire life to help me see myself as he sees me. And I think through just reading these things and studying and really through school, he showed me, Corinne, this is how I see you. I see you as a person. And stop objectifying yourself and reducing yourself to a superficial measure of attraction. So personalism changed me. And I believe no matter where you are on your journey of womanhood or how you understand womanhood or even manhood right now, I believe this, each of us can leave here today being more of a personalist, being more authentically Catholic. So because of the church's personalistic approach to womanhood, I am free of the depersonalizing, reductive understanding of womanhood that I had. I'm free of the exhausting and pathetic pursuit of being attractive at all times. And I'm now learning to see myself as a subject of love, as a person, not as an object of attraction. If I could go back now and say something to poor little 12-year-old Corinne sitting on the couch crying about puberty, I would tell her, little Corinne, get some new friends. And there are problems with the way women are understood. And the best way to fight against that is just by embracing yourself as God created you. I would tell her never to be ashamed of being a girl, because that's how you were created, and never forget your personhood. So, kind of coming to the end here. Because the human person can never be treated as an object, this means that we have to see the Catholic woman, who is a human person, whoever she may be, in light of her full depth, always. So, when we reduce the Catholic woman, whoever she may be, to measures of modesty, to attractiveness, to receptivity without boundaries, to cowardice, to weakness, we are doing an injustice to the personhood of every woman that exists. This is, in part at least, it can be sexism. And as Catholics and as personalists, we can't stand for this. In a letter that St. John Paul II wrote to a fellow theologian, he said, the evil of our times consists in the first place a kind of degradation, indeed a pulverization of the fundamental uniqueness of each person. This includes the Catholic woman, because the Catholic woman is a human person, and who the Catholic woman is varies from woman to woman. So, in sum, when we reduce the Catholic woman to whatever it may be, we fail to see her personhood and her uniqueness as a woman. And women in this room, we have to learn, whatever it is for you, maybe you're not reducing yourself to your attractiveness, which good if you're not, but whatever it is for you, whatever you find yourself just pouring your identity into time and time again, just ask you to step back and try to see yourself wholly in light of your personhood, in light of every aspect of yourself. I do want to say, too, to the women in this room, that we actually kind of have a unique disposition to this because of the feminine genius. Though men can certainly see people as persons, women, like within our biology and with our ontology, our souls, we kind of are a little bit of advantage to be able to see people in a more unique way. So just wherever you are on this journey, as you begin or continue to embrace yourself as a person and see yourself as a person, remember that's a part of your being. You're embracing part of your womanhood by doing that. Being a personalist is very feminine and masculine too, but so let's stop aspiring to be a cardboard cutout image of the Catholic woman, whatever that is for you. Let's aspire to be like Mary and to live authentically ourselves, just as she did, and to say yes to God as she did. Let's aspire to be the holiest versions of ourselves, and holiness does not include accepting reductive, sexist stereotypes about ourselves. Let's stop thinking of the Catholic woman as just one person or a set of qualities or an ideal. So, who is the Catholic woman? The Catholic woman is me, and to the women in this room, the Catholic woman is you. And each of us are going to live out our faith and our womanhood unique to our personhood. So, let's embrace each Catholic woman as she is. Let's be more authentically Catholic, and let's be personalists. Thank you.